Hello there YouTube, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be building a desktop application using Python with the notes. Okay, so before we get started with the project, let me tell you what are the dependencies that we need to make this application. So I'm going to open my terminal, and obviously you need to make sure you have Python installed in your system, so you can just check that by using this command right here, python 3-version, and here you can see I'm using Python 3.12.3. Now if you don't get this as the output, you're going to have to install it, because you'll either get this or you'll get an error. So apart from Python, we also need Tkinter, which is a framework that is very popular for building desktop applications. But we're not just going to use Tkinter in this video, because the problem with Tkinter is that this framework is extremely old. So most of the GUI widgets of this framework aren't quite modern, and that is why we're going to install customtkinter as well. So if you want to install Tkinter, you can just run this command pip3, which is used for installing Python packages and modules. And if you're using Linux machine, make sure you also have this flag set, that is break system packages, because the pip command doesn't really work on Linux unless you're using a virtual environment. But you don't need to do that, because you can make use of this flag right here. So just hit enter, and I have already installed this framework, so I don't need to do that. And as you can see, this framework is already installed in my system, and along with that I'm going to install customtkinter as well. So you can see right here we have the requirements satisfied already, because we have already installed this library, which is why I don't really need to do that. And another thing to do is to set up our project in a folder. So I'm going to go to the documents folder. You can set up your project in any folder you want to, really, it doesn't matter. So I'm going to do it on the documents folder, inside the folder where I store all my Python scripts. So it is in this Python folder, and all the folders of Python applications. So I'm going to create a new one. So I'm going to create a new folder named notes app, which is going to be the folder where we are going to create our application, and I'm going to go inside that folder. Alright, so this folder is going to be our Python project, and now I'm just going to create a very simple main.py file and get started with the development. Alright, so you guys probably are seeing some interesting things right here. I've opened my file named main.py. So this is going to be the Python script for the application. Now let's go back to our Python file, and the first thing I'm going to do is import Tkinter as tk and import customtkinter as ctk. So these are the two frameworks that will help us run the application with the GUI widgets, that is the graphical user interface. So let's just run this Python file by saving it. There we go, there's our file, python 3 main.py. So the script has run successfully. Now I'm going to do a couple of things here. So I'm going to create a class called window, and it's going to have a constructor with title and height and width. Now why are we doing this? Well, I'm just creating a window interface to make it easier to work with. So I'm going to create a few variables here. So I'm going to say self.root equals to ctk.ctk. So this will create a window for us. And I'm going to do a couple of other things right here. So for this root window, I'm going to create a title. Now this title somehow seems to be clashing with this thing right here, so it's kind of makes it unreadable, and that is why I'm going to add a prefix with an underscore. And I'm going to use Python's string format to add the title into this function right here. And I'm going to set the dimensions of our application's window. So it's going to be a relatively small window, but you can resize it as per your convenience. And another thing I'm going to do is ctk set appearance mode to dark. So this will set our application in dark mode. Now there are 3 modes you can set for your applications, that is by default system, or you can set the mode to white or dark. Alright, so this is going to be our window object right here, and below I'm going to create a main function that is going to define our the complete flow of our application. So I'm going to say app equals to window, and I'm going to name this application as notes app, a very simple name. And I'm going to set the window size as 800 by 600. Now these are just default values I'm giving right here, but we are just hard coding them for now. We'll look into that later. And the next thing I'm going to do is get access to the root method, and I'm going to say app.root.main loop. And outside this function, next thing we need to do is call this function. So I'm gonna call that function something like this. So this is a pretty simple Python script that will create a GUI window. Let's see if there are any errors. So the code ran successfully and we have absolutely no errors, which is amazing. As you can see here, we have our window and it looks pretty good, but the problem is I think the dimensions I entered are quite opposite. So what I'm going to do is instead I'm going to make it to 600 by 800 instead, because the window is not the way we want it to be. There you go. So that's how the window looks like. It's pretty cool, and I think we can make it slightly larger. So instead of 800, I'm going to enlarge it to maybe 870. A strange number, but that doesn't matter. So 660 for the height, and let's run the script again. So just a little bit larger, and there's our window right there. Now because the script we are executing right here is actually a Python script right here. So instead of just calling the main function right here, I'm going to make use of a Python global variable, which is underscore underscore name underscore underscore, and if name is equal to main, we are going to call this function, meaning this code will only execute as a Python script. It's not a module. This file isn't a module, it is a script. So we can't make use of the code in this script, and that is why we are using this line right here, if name equals to main. So yeah, that looks pretty good so far. Now the next thing we need to do is obviously add components to our application. Okay, so we have created our notes application, which looks very boring right here, but don't worry, we'll make it interesting. So let's close this window for now. So what we had to do right now is create 2 tabs. So I'm going to create another function called menu. So this function is going to create a menu interface for our application. So in our menu we'll have a couple of things. Now since we are making an application that help us take notes and save those notes and just view them, we need to basically define the menu accordingly to make sure things work just right. So in my menu bar, I'm going to have 2 things. We're going to have an interface that is going to be in a form of a tab, and that is going to show all the notes that we have taken so far, and another menu where you should be able to create a new notebook. So our menu function is going to take another parameter, and that's going to be the root, which is the app window. So I'm going to call this root variable from the window object right here. So I'm going to create another variable called root right here. I'm going to say app.root. Now instead of calling app.root.main loop, I'm going to say root.main loop. So this will refer to the actual window itself. So we're going to pass the menu, and instead of calling this menu, let's actually name it as menu bar, even though it's not technically a menu bar, but you get the idea. So I'm just gonna put on a comment here. So I just put on some comments for you guys to be able to understand this code very well. So we have called the menu bar function and passed the reference to our window right here, which is pretty nice. So inside our menu bar, we're going to have a tab, 2 tabs in our window. So let's create a Tkinter widget called tabs. So let's call it as tabs CTK tab view, and that's going to have the root element right here. So let me show you the official documentation of Tkinter. So if you want to find this documentation, just head to search for customtkinter, and you should be able to find this documentation. Now click on documentation and you should be able to see this page I'm showing you right here. So inside the CTK widgets we have a lot of things. We have buttons, checkboxes, combo boxes, entries. We're going to see what's all that later, but for now let us look for the tab view. Alright, so this is what I needed. So this tab view is going to have multiple pages, just like how you have tabs on the browser, something like that. And the first argument it takes is actually a positional argument by name master, which is the reference to the window and a couple of other things. So I'm going to add a few tabs on this inside the and the first one is going to be views, and the second one is going to be create. Now let's try to run this script to make sure things are working just fine. And there we go. Our code is working very fine. However, we don't see the tab view just yet. Well, that is because we need to position this tab view. Although we have created it, we haven't positioned it. So this tab view object has a method called place, which will help you place the widget into the parent window, that is the parent object right here. So I'm going to say RELX, which refers to the X position, and we're taking the parameters in decimals. And one thing to keep in mind is that these values you're seeing are values between 0 and 1. So 0.5 here basically means we are positioning the layout at the center, that is 50% the width of the parent element, which is actually a pretty smart thing to do, because we want the tab layout to be at the center. Alright, so let's try that again. As you can see, we still can't see it. The reason is we haven't styled this tab view yet. We need to give it some other parameters like height. So I'm going to say height equals to the height of the parent element. So root.winfo height minus 10, just to make sure it does fit in the window perfectly, and root.winfo width. Now let's see how the code works. Okay, so after a couple of minutes of trying to figure out why the tab view is not rendering on the window, I realized I made a big mistake. That is, instead of calling the main loop method after the creation of the menu bar, I did it before that. That is probably why I couldn't see the tab in the first place. So let's try that again. Alright, so here we can see the tab right here, and I have hard-coded it with some random value that is 200 by 200 just to see things are working or not. But I'm going to take back the value, that is the window width and height. So yeah, there you go. You can see that the tab has covered the entire frame, and I think this looks pretty good. So the next thing we're going to do is create widgets for our tabs. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a button that is going to help us create notes. So I'm going to say button equals to CTK button, and we have to put the parent element, the reference to the parent element, and I'm going to create the view. I'm going to select the views tab right here, and let us create a button of height 50 and width 100, and I'm going to place this button right here with exposition of 0.5. So basically it's going to be at the center of the window from left to right, but from top I just want it 10%, and obviously we are centering the widget. So let's try that. Oops. So we have an error right here. So CTK tab view object has no attribute called tablets. What could have gone wrong? Let us look at the documentation. Okay, so the mistake that we made was it's not tab list. I don't know why I put it as tab list for a reason, but let's get it to tab, and probably this should work. You don't really have to remember all these functions. You can just look them up in the documentation. And there we go. So we have the button right here, and as you can see, the button has the label CTK button, and we don't want that. So instead what I'm going to do is add a text attribute inside this button. So let's run that. Okay, so we have our button that shows the text, and let's make some changes to the button. So instead of 100 width, I'll put it to 150. Oops. Okay, that looks good. And another attribute to add is going to be the font size, just to make the font a little bit more visual. So I'm going to say font equals to monospace, and I'm going to set the font size to 30. So that looks pretty good to me. So I'm going to make a small change right here, or let's just put it right. Honestly, I think this looks slightly better. It's just adding that plus icon right there makes it look a bit more cooler. Now obviously you can do a lot more changes, like changing the color of the button, which is something we can do later, but for now let's just focus on the important stuff. So the next thing I'm going to do is create a frame for our window. So when we create our notebooks, they're all going to be displayed right here as some kind of boxes that will show different notes. Now we need to have a scroll bar to make sure we can see all of them, because if the notebook gets too long, we just won't be able to fit it in the window. There just isn't enough space, and that's why I'm going to create a scrollable frame on this window right here. So customtkinter comes with another kind of widget called scrollable frames. So where is that? Let's look it up in the documentation. So a scrollable frame is another kind of widget that we are going to use, but first let us create the scrollable frame widget first, and we're going to do it right here. And I'm going to create a variable scroll bar window. Scrollable frame and tab inside views. So we want both the frame inside our views tab, and we're going to praise the scroll bar window similarly, just like how we place the button. So we're going to have it at the center, but we are going to set the Y position to make sure it's at the bottom on the frame, and we'll need to center it, and obviously provide the inputs for the height. So I'm going to set the height as the height of the parent element but instead of that, let's just hard code the value for now. So I'm going to say 100 as the height and 100 as the width. Now let's run our script. Okay, so this is our scrollable frame right here. You can see it has the scroll bar, but it's actually overlapping the button. So let's change the positioning. So I have set it to 0.5 on the y-axis. Okay, I think this looks better. So now, instead of hard coding these values, I'm going to use the parent elements width and height. So as usual, we have to update the widget to make sure we are able to access these height and width. So I'm going to say tabs.winfo height minus 20, or let's just put it to minus 50, and tabs.winfo width minus 10. So this is going to be the height, and let's see that if it's working. Oh, I think the widget got a bit too large. Let's try that again. Let's set it to 50, and as you can see, it looks perfect. The width is perfect, but there's one problem. We somehow managed to lose the button on the top. So let us reduce the height. Let's set it to 100. Okay, so 100 was still not enough. Okay, we need to reduce it even more. Still not enough. Okay, how about 200? Maybe 240 should do the trick. And that was perfect. Now another thing we can do is change the position on the y-axis, because I think it's a bit too above the screen. So instead of 0.5, we can also use lower precision numbers such as 0.54. So around 54% of the top the top of the widget, and there we go. We can see everything clearly. And now we should be able to append all our notes inside the scrollable flame and never run out of space, which is pretty nice. I'm going to create another function called input form, which is going to help us create a new notebook. So as usual, it's going to be a function that's going to have the parent window as parameters. And let's just pass it for now, because the function is not doing anything for now. And I'm going to call the input form function inside the menu bar. So I'm going to say tabs.views. Tabs.tab, and the views tab right here. There we go. Now the button, another thing we need to do, by the way, is to make our button responsive. So when we click on this button, nothing really happens, but in reality what should happen is we should go to the views, the create tab right here, to create a new note. So we're going to create a callback function on this button constructor. So I'm going to use the command variable. So the button object of the customtkinter actually provides you another positional argument, which is a callback function. So an event that should be fired when this button is clicked. So I'm going to create a lambda function, and let me just show you what happens when this button is clicked. So we're saying we want to print hello on the screen if we click this button. So let's try that. So I'm going to click on this button, and there we can see we got our hello. Pretty nice. So let's try that again. You can see it does work really well. So, but obviously we don't want to print hellos. We want to change the tab. So I'm going to say tabs.set create. Now let's see what happens. So the moment I click this button, you can see the tab got changed, and that is what we wanted. Okay, so now let's work on our input form. So the first thing I'm going to do is create an input box which is going to have the title. So we'll have a couple of input boxes and a button to save all the. So I'm going to create a widget called entry. Now let us run the script. Okay, so let's click on this button, and there we go. We have opened the create window, and this is our input box right here. So here I can enter the title, and obviously it looks quite small to me. So I'm going to enlarge the width and height. Okay, so this looks pretty good to me. Now let us look for more changes that we can make to the entry widget in our documentation. So we can obviously change the height and width, and we can also add a placeholder text. This is the attribute that we want to add. So I'm going to say placeholder. So this this input is going to take the name of our file, and there we go. We have the placeholder, which is like some kind of a watermark inside the input box. And another thing I would like to okay, so this is going to have the input for our font size. So you can see we have the text right here, which is pretty nice. Now let us do a couple of other things, such as create a label for our text. So I'm going to say so this label widget is going to create a simple text label, and it's going to have the text create notes. Or let's give the text as new notebook. Okay, and let's set the font size to around 25 pixels. So I'm going to enlarge the font a little bit to something like 32, and let's change the text label's position to 0.16, so around 16%, the position of, that is the height of the window. I think that looks better. Alright, so like I was saying, we need another text box right here. We don't want to create another entry widget right here. So instead of using the entry widget, I'm going to use another widget from customtkinter, which is going to be the text box. We're going to create it, and I'm going to call this as text area. In the same way as what we did for the title widget. And I'm going to set the height as 70. Actually, no, we're going to set the height to be much larger than the parent widget. We're going to set the width as the same as the entry. So I'm going to set it to 700. I'm going to set the height as something like 300. And there we go, there's our text box. So here we can add as much text as we want to, which is pretty nice. And as you can see, the color of this text box is slightly different as well. We can add as much text as we want. It has the scroll bar, it's on its own. So I'm going to increase the height of this text bar slightly. Okay, so as you can see, it is covering the top frame right there. Alright, so we're going to create the save button right here. Alright, so now that we were working with the form data, we want to be able to save into our files, because we are using files to save all this data. So in order to get the text inside this text box, we're going to call this function from the save button, which has this callback function, and we're going to print text area dot get 1 point from the first position to the end. So this will help us to fetch the text from the text area. So what we're doing is, the moment we click on save button, we should get the text inside the text box. So let us try that. So I'm gonna say hello there. So as you can see, we have hello there printed. Now let's try something else. I'm gonna say 1 2 3 4 5, just give some dummy text for now. You can see we have the buffer shown here. So we're going to save this data inside a dictionary. I'm gonna say data list, which is going to be a dictionary that's going to have strings. File name, and I'm going to put the current date, which is the current date and time. And in order to do so, I'm going to use the time module. So from time, we're going to import string formatted time. So this will help us get the string formatted time. So I'm going to say created on strf time, and I'm going to use the standard formats. And another variable is going to be content. So I'll leave it as a blank string, And another attribute that I'm going to add inside this dictionary is going to be the ID. That is the ID of our data. So I'm going to use an ID generator, which is going to be the UUID, or universally unique identifier. So from UUID, I want to import UUID4, which is going to generate a UUID of version 4. Now the reason why we are using an ID generator is to make sure that our data is uniquely identified. So I'm going to add another field, which is going to be modified date, and I'm just gonna set it to none for now. So I'm going to create another function right here, which is save form data. And inside the data list, I'm going to add the data. So I'm going to say content equals to text area dot get Alright, so that's pretty much it. Now the only thing we need to do is save this data, but for now I'm just gonna print it on the screen. Now there are some other things that we need to do, and that is to make sure that the title field is actually filled, it's not empty. So I'm going to use a variable which is going to be text and entry title.get, and I'll use the same variable here. Now if the text is an empty string, then that means something is wrong. We don't want the title to be empty. So, and I'm just gonna quickly add some data, 1 2 3, and there we go. So we have our data list right here. We have our UUID and the file name, or you can say the title of the data list. So yeah, that's what our data list looks like, which is pretty nice. Now, in order to do error handling, we can make use of another utilities from the Tkinter module, and unfortunately customtkinter doesn't really have a utility, but we can use from Tkinter import message box. So message box will help us create dialog boxes. And the description of what caused the error and what needs to be done to resolve that error. So I'm going to say, hey, that the title must be provided. So let us try that. So I'm not going to enter the title, but the note, and as you can see right here, we have an error right here. So a small syntax error. I actually got the spelling wrong. Now that should work out. And there we go. So we have this pop-up box right here. So like I was saying, this is the title of the dialog window right here, which is error. And another thing we have right here is the description, which is the title must be provided. So I'm going to click on OK. This is a pretty useful utility right here. Alright, so we need to save the data into our system. So I'm going to create another function called 𝚒𝚘𝚜𝚑, and we're going to pass the data list as our parameter, and we're going to create the function right here, 𝚒𝚘𝚜𝚑 data list. So far we have been able to create our data, and here it is right here in the form of a Python dictionary. Now the next step would be to convert this data into a JSON and store it inside a file. So in order to convert this dictionary into JSON, we have to serialize using the JSON module. And from JSON I'm going to import loads and dumps. So the load function is used to convert a JSON string into a Python dictionary, and the dumps function will serialize the Python dictionary into a JSON file. The object of type UUID is not JSON serializable. Okay, so the mistake we made was probably this thing right here. So we need to convert this into a string, and I'm just gonna typecast it. Hopefully it should work right now. So as you can see, things have worked out quite well right now, and as you can. Alright, so now the only thing we need to do is save this data into a file. So I'm going to store this in a variable called JSON. And by the way, let's complete this with a few type hints. So this is our JSON string, and I'm going to do a couple of things right here. So in order to save this into a file, we can build in utility called the open function. So this will help us create and read files. And another thing we need is the OS module of Python. So I'm going to say from OS import path. So we're going to create a directory where we'll have our file. So the directory's name is going to be data, or let's call it notes data. and our config file is going to be, data.json. So that's going to be our the config file. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is check if the directory exists. So I'm going to say path.exists of data, and if it's false, we're going to create a new directory. So I'm going to import mkdir function from the OS module. Alright, so we were talking about saving the data into our JSON file. So in our method of save data, we're basically using a predefined directories, which is the notes data directory, which is going to store our data. Now this directory can be stored anywhere in the system. So first of all, if the directory, the configuration directory doesn't exist, we're going to create a new directory. So once the directory is created, obviously we need the file inside the directory. So we're going to create a new file. Now, even if the directory exists but the file doesn't, we can always create the file by using these conditionals. So if the file doesn't exist, we're going to create a file using the open method. So we're going to dump the JSON object into this function, which is going to return a JSON string, and we're going to write the data into the file. Now, if the file does exist, then that means there are two cases. Maybe the file exists but the file is empty, or the file exists already has some data, so we just need to append more data into the file. So if the file is empty, we're just going to give our existing data into the file. But if it's not empty, we're going to use the existing data and our current data and combine it. So we are loading our JSON string and by converting it into a Python array, a Python list of dictionaries, and we're concatenating the list, that is this list right here, and basically this will concatenate both the lists. And finally, at the last step, we are modifying the file by dumping our JSON data into the file. So let me show you that, guys. So I'm gonna remove this notes directory for now because I used it. And I'm gonna say hello 1 2 3 4 testing to see if things are working. And the moment we click the button, we don't really see much, but we're going to add a pop-up to make sure things are successful. And if it's not, there should probably be an error which we should be able to handle. So we have this directory right here created called notes data, and I'm just gonna read the file inside the notes this directory. So it is a data.json file, and there we go, we have the data saved inside our JSON file, which is pretty interesting. Now let us add some more data into the file. So I'm gonna say day 2. Hello, this is another message. And as you can see, we have absolutely no errors, which means data has been saved successfully. Now let us read the data from the file, and there we go. So we have two objects inside our JSON. So this is I believe the first one, and this is the second one. So we successfully managed to save the data. Now another thing I would like to do is do some error handling. So I'm going to nest the entire code right from here to here inside a try block. And I'm going to use the exception block right here, and I'm going to say accept exception as E. So if an error did occur, we're going to print the error message and show it in a pop-up box or a dialog box. So I'm going to create the same message box just like how we did it before. Dot show error, and I'm going to show the error message right here. So I'm going to say some error has occurred, and on the new line I'm going to print the error message. So if everything did go successfully, we should be able to show up another pop-up message showing to the user that the data was saved successfully. So I'm going to return from the error box, from the error message right here, and instead of using the show error method, I'm going to use a show info method, which is another method inside the message box object. So I'm going to say as note data was saved successfully. And I think that is better. So now let us give this a test run. So here we have our pop-up which says data was saved successfully. So this is a good way to just have a visual that the data is indeed safe. So I'm just gonna read the data inside the file. Oops. So as you can see, we have 3 objects inside the JSON file, which is pretty good. So we have created data, but our next step is to display the data right here. So I'm going to create another function, and that is called display data, and it's going to take another parameter which is the root element, and we don't want to return anything from this function. Alright, so here's the thing. So like I said, that we needed this directory to store our data, but what if the data did not exist? So if this directory somehow doesn't exist for any reason, then we're just going to display a text message on the center showing that there's no data found. So I'm going to use a condition So if this path doesn't exist, then that means we don't have any data to begin with. So I'm going to create a variable on the top here, destroy the variable, because there's a chance that maybe there was no data to begin with, but if there is any data created, the label will still exist, so we have to destroy the label. And the next step would be to fetch the data. So I'm going to say JSON dictionary, and I'm going to set it to none for now, because we'll be fetching the data from the file. So I'm going to say path.join nodes.data.json in read mode. So we're opening this file in reading, for reading. So JSON equals to loads function, and we're reading the JSON string and parsing it with the loads function. And finally, now that we have this data, inside the tabs, right, now let's view the data. So somehow we got an error, an attribute error. It says path.exist module POSIX path has no attribute exist. Did you mean oh, okay, that was a typical syntax error. Let's just get it fixed. Oh, looks like we have another error. This is crazy. This is crazy, man. Path.exists takes one positional argument. Oh, of course, I forgot to path.join this. Alright, so like I was saying, we are iterating through all the nodes that we have created in the JSON object. So we have created a few widgets. Let me show you what the output looks like for this. So there we go. These are the nodes that we have created so far, and we have created simple tabs that will display all the nodes. Now obviously I could add some color to this. So what I'm going to do now is add some other important things, like a button to delete all the nodes and view the node. So now what I'm going to do is create a few buttons. Delete button. And I'm going to keep the color of the button to be red. Okay, so let's put the width to 70. And I'm going to place this widget mostly on the corners. That looks perfect, to be honest. And let's create another button for viewing the widgets. Okay, so this is the view button. Let's make some changes in the positioning. how about 5/8? There we go. So that looks pretty good to me. And the view button. Now another thing we need to add is obviously the callback for our delete and view button. So the callback is going to be pretty simple. We're going to create a lambda function. So I'm going to say lambda, and I'm going to call delete note, and we're going to pass the ID of the current node. So we're iterating through all the nodes one by one, and I'm going to take the ID as a parameter. So we'll have this another function right here, delete note, which is going to take the ID as a parameter. Find the node which has this ID and just delete it from the menu, which is it's as simple as that. Now the same thing for views. We want to display and edit our nodes. So command for view there we go. So we have created two functions. So I'm going to say JSON, which is dictionary, and then I'm going to take the file path as the consideration. So with open nodes data and our config JSON file. We're going to read the file first, and we're going to parse out JSON from the JSON file. So I'm just going to use simple filtering with help of list comprehension. So object for object in JSON, if object /ID is not equals to the ID. So if I just print this for a moment, we're going to save this data in the same file. By stringifying this JSON right here. So the moment we click on the delete button, this function will be invoked. However, we don't really want that to happen. Instead, what we want is the program to ask the user if he really wants to delete that particular node. Close the pop-up and leave the program as it is. So I'm going to say if this output equals to false, then just return. Otherwise, we're going to delete the file. So let's try that. So let's just open the program again, and there we go, the file is already deleted. So that is for the delete utility. Now for viewing and editing, we're just going to open another window that is going to give us the option to edit and view the file. So the final step to creating the build of our application is to convert this Python file into a binary file. And in order to do so, we can use a Python package called 𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑. So 𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑 is basically a software that converts a Python script into an executable. So if you want to install it, just use pip3 and install 𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑. And as you can see, I've already got it on my machine, so this is how you can install it on your system if you haven't. So the next step is to make use of the program on the command line. So now what I'm going to do is show you all the commands for 𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑. So there are a lot of commands that you can use with 𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑. So you can just use the help flag to get all the details. But for now, let us focus on creating our executable. So I'm going to use 𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑, and I'm going to use a few flags. So for the first flag is going to be one file, which means we're only working with one file right here. I can use 𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑 one file, and I'm also going to use this flag no window, which basically means in order for me to run the executable that this program is going to produce, I don't have to use the terminal. I can just click on the executable and it will open automatically, which is obviously very convenient. So I'm going to say main.py, and this is going to create build. So just in a moment we should have our executable ready. Alright, so just after a few seconds we successfully completed creating our executable. Now if I just ls on my terminal, I can see two new directories. So these directories will have the executable program that I need. So let me go to this directory right here, which is the dist, and inside this directory we have an executable, which is our program. So let us run this program. There we go. So you can see the program is right here, and just let me show you that you don't need to use the terminal to run this program. So I'm going to open this file by just clicking on this icon, and there we go, we have loaded the program right here. So you don't need to use the terminal to run this program anymore. It is a complete executable, which is really nice.